So good evening to our guest speakers, Mr. Anand Raj and Ms. Bindu Jairam, head of the department, School of Management Studies at National Institute of Technology, Calicut, Dr. Mohammad Shafi, other friends and colleagues, rather co-travelers for the cause of higher education, members of Let's Chat discussion forum, students of Amity University, because this time we got a very good response. In fact, a lot of them had shown interest from Amity as well. So students from Amity University, members of Calicut Management Association, all others who have joined us this evening. A warm good evening to you all. So the coronavirus pandemic is far more than a health crisis. It is impacting almost every area of our lives, from politics to economy to our society, our environment. So the outbreak of this current pandemic or the coronavirus and the ensuing global pandemic, which started in 2020, had brought with it a number of unprecedented side effects, and there are far-reaching implications as well. So the direct effects were felt in the economy as well as in the key institutions within our society. However, I think there were also indirect effects from these changes, and the net effect has been by and large positive. What I'm referring to is in terms of the reduction in the greenhouse emissions, or in other words, the improved air quality in different cities across the globe, reduced oil exploration, lessen water noise pollutions, reduced pressure on the tourist destinations, all of which may assist with the kind of restoration of the ecological system. In fact, it was the UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, a report which got published in 2021, had said that the world needs a couple of things. Number one, consistency and coherence between the emergency relief, which is kind of not avoidable, and the long-term objectives of sustainability, building resilience, equity, and all that. And this report further elaborates the need for sustainable development goals, and it states, which we adapted in 2015, which contains 17 targets designed to combat poverty, healthcare, improve education, and most importantly, to safeguard the environment. So what I'm trying to say is, in addition to non-access to continuing education or increased poverty and non-availability of food and other basic essentials, there are also some negative consequences of COVID-19, which it has brought in, like the increase of medical waste, haphazard usage or the disposal of disinfectants, masks, gloves, so many other things, which is actually endangering the environment. So what in turn had happened is the pandemic sort of reignited the debate about sustainability, environment, responsible business, environment consciousness, and so many other things which are all cross-connected. Or in other words, there are certain rethinking in terms of the misplaced priorities that individuals and organizations have set. Many people now have a greater appreciation about the benefits of the impact on the natural environment. So individuals have now started focusing on ecological criteria in addition to profit targets, or is geared towards building a sustainable economy. But we are blessed to have with us today two entrepreneurs who thought about sustainable business venture much before this pandemic. And the sustainability is with respect to two aspects. One is economic sustainability, which of course is needed for their continuing their business, and also environmental sustainability. I hope probably this 1 hour of interaction, 1 hour or how much ever time they're willing to spend with us, with both the speakers, would take us through their journey of what made them commence their venture, or how they became entrepreneurs, or why they thought it is important to become entrepreneurs. What were the bottlenecks or the challenges they had in the pursuit of establishing their venture? What accolades they had received in this journey, and probably a little about what specific challenges you had during the past 18 or 19 months, especially the COVID-19, that phase of running or continuing the business, how they tackled it, and how they consider or define their venture as environmentally conscious and responsible. And because also ensuring economic and environmental sustainability. So both the speakers, I understand, would be speaking from their own office premises, which in itself speaks volumes about the busy schedule and how much they are involved in their venture. Because I remember when I had contacted Anand Raj sir, he said, for an entrepreneur, there isn't a holiday. It's like 24/7, you're fully occupied, and you don't know, when the customer needs. So, but again, as I said at the beginning, we are really, really grateful that you've agreed to share your time and thoughts with us. Both of you, that has been the format that we follow. We'll get about 20 minutes each to speak about whatever you wish to share with us. And then we shall take a few questions, or we shall invite our audience to ask the questions. So that's the rough introduction about the theme, is also about the format, the agenda for today. With that, I hand it over to the co-host, if she wishes to make any comments, or else we can directly hand it over to the speaker. Over to you, Bhagya.
Thank you, sir. Now I invite our honorable guest, Bindu Jairam, to address the gathering.
Good evening, everyone. Hope you all had your cup of coffee, tea, whatever. It's going to be a long discussion, maybe. So I would like to start with a quote. It says, necessity is the mother of all inventions. I think that is how I got into this business. Basically, I started this brand called Ipaka. We are a preservative-free and completely chemical-free food mixes. We have ready to cook, instant mix, and ready to eat mixes. And basically the idea was that my career was a cliche. I was a software engineer. I did my engineering, and then I joined one of the MNCs. I worked with multiple MNCs for about 10 years. And, while you climb up the ladder, there is always challenge in terms of managing your time, and then work-life balance. That all comes up later in your career. You'll not realize that now, but and then work extended hours, you come back home, and then you still have to cook. I had kids, and then I had to, you can't really eat out or order out, or rely on these mixes that are available in the market. So I always had this challenge of, okay, while I start from office, I used to on the way think about, okay, what am I going to make for dinner today? Do I have everything at home? Like, do I have dal? Do I have rice, vegetables, atta, everything? Think about it, and then like on the way, make a pit stop to pick up all these things, and then come back home. And that itself is exhausting. And then get fresh and then start cooking. It's already late. You're rushing through it. It's very stressful. So I always had this thing that, okay, either I need to hire a cook, someone will come and cook for me, or I need to somehow manage. There has to be a simpler way. It's not that I'm the first person facing this. So I started researching on some products that are already there in the market. Is there something that can simplify my life, especially with this cooking thing? And every product that I came across, either then they were not authentic because we are not used to using those things. We always make things from scratch at home, or they had tons of chemicals in them. And definitely that is not something I would like to feed my kids. And while I was discussing this with my mom, she's like, okay, let's try something, well, let's make something at home. And it took a few weeks for us to, multiple iterations and then come up with something for rasam. Like it was an instant rasam. And I was so excited. And just out of the excitement of creating something, I kind of gave some samples to my friends and close friends and some extended family members. And to my surprise, they all like came back after a week or two, and then they said, either you give me more of this or just give me the recipe. And that actually put me into thinking, okay, okay, what should I do now? Should I make more of it? So probably I think I made more of it and gave it to them. I don't remember, but what happened is that around that time I took a maternity break, and then I was working at a startup, and it was very difficult to manage that break and then go back to the same position and all that. So I finally quit, and I thought, okay, this is the point. I think I should start something of my own, because that was a thing that I always had, that at some point in time in life, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to do something, create something of my own, but I was not sure what. So I had like a list of ideas that I could potentially do. And while I was evaluating what is the investment that it takes to start the business, and how many people do I need to hire, and what all things I could do, how is the market for it, and is there really, is this closing a gap in the market? Is there something that people would really come and look for? Um, Finally, I think I nailed down on this food aspect, simply because there's no recession in food. People always will come looking for it, because it's one of your life support, right? So you have to have food every day. And the other thing is that there were no products in the market which were either completely preservative and chemical free, or that would appeal to you as a to your palate. By what I mean by palate is that something that we make as rasam might not appease to something what people eat in Chennai as rasam. They're very different. And what I would like to have is what something I make every day, repeat that on a probably twice or thrice a week. Whereas what I would like to have as rasam from another region of our country would be something once in a while. So my palate is very tuned to what we have been regularly eating since time I know. And there was nothing that I could really find. So I spent about 3 months researching on, why, what, and how. Like, is this really going to work? And at one point, when I felt that, okay, I think this is what I want to do, I went ahead and registered the business. I got the FSSAI certificate. I thought, let me give it a try. Let me start doing it from home. There's nothing special that I need to buy or invest in to start with. So let me do a small pilot. So what I did was, we at home, we designed a label. We put all the necessary information on it. Being an engineer, you always have a process to follow. You're used to follow a process. And then we got that printed. We got some pouches, and then there was a supermarket very close to my place where I used to regularly shop. And I approached that guy and said, hey, you know what, I'm starting something like this. Can you help me with identifying some customers for this pilot? All you need to do is ask them to pick up one or two of these pouches as samples, and then take down their number and tell them that a week later I would give them a call. This is all you need to do. And you could also use these and just tell me what you think about it. And the sample was circulated among 100 such customers. So some from the supermarket who buy from the supermarket. And even like I was, when I was walking around on the road or something, I just stop by and, ask them, do you want to try, I'm starting something like this, because it's very essential to take feedback from strangers. I always say this whenever I talk about it. I say, don't consider the feedback from your friends and relatives as a feedback. It's that giving it to you out of courtesy. They may not always be honest with it. The feedback that you would get from strangers, somebody you have no idea, totally, a new someone you're meeting for the first time, is someone that you can count on, because they'll be honest. They don't care what you think or whether you'll be hurt or whatever. So uh, like I try to reach as many strangers as possible and give out. And then luckily no one rejected me. No one said, hey, I don't want it, who are you, why are you giving me all these samples and all. And so I took their numbers, and then after a week or 10 days, I sat down and started calling each one of them. So basically, to understand, did you like it, did you use it? First of all, did you like it? What did you like about it? What do you think that we could improve on this? And if you find this on the shelves of the supermarket or wherever you buy from, would you buy it? And what would be the price point? What do you think this you would be ready to spend to buy this? And such questions. And at least I was able to collect feedback on at least 70 people out of 100. Some of them don't respond, they're not available, whatever reasons. And I think that gave me a fair idea that yes, this is going to work. People are actually looking for preservative free and something that is close to home cooked food, and something that they could say that yeah, this is like how I make it at home, or this is what I relate to, this taste is great, I mean, I want to eat this on a regular basis, something on those lines. And then so in 2018, that's how I started with 3 products and launched this brand called iPaka. And since this was something very new, I was not sure whom to approach to even to get into retail and all the other overheads that comes with it. I thought I mean, why not make use of a platform like Amazon? And so ours is a digital first brand. So we launched our product on Amazon in 2018 June, and till date we are still a digital first brand. We have not ventured into retail market yet, but maybe the next 1 year we will do. And today we have about 14 products, which covers the ready to cook, instant mixes, and ready to eat. One thing I'm proud of is that whatever the unique, there are some unique recipes that we cover in our products, and then these unique recipes are something that people might have not even heard of or never tried it beyond Karnataka. So I can say that some of these mixes are being used in Punjab, Haryana, all over India actually, when they order on Amazon. And that's a very good feeling when I feel that, yeah, I mean, somebody in Punjab is actually eating a brinjal curry made out of iPaka. So that's a great feeling. Or someone in Assam is actually eating dosas from our mixes. So that keeps us going. And fortunately, we got great feedback from our customers. And our repeat purchase is pretty high compared to the industry standards. So they keep coming back. Once they like one product, they always come back and say, I want to try this, and that goes on. The customer journey goes on. There are people who might think that okay, this is not something I like, but that is okay. I mean, we can't really appease anyone and everyone, like we can't make a product which appeases to everyone. There are certain aspects that we take care of, like we try and keep the salt level to a very a medium range, because there are people who would like a pinch of extra salt to it. They can always add on top of it. But if we keep it to a level which is on a higher side, you cannot really, I mean, they couldn't really add anything to it to manage the salt level. So we keep it at a mid-range level, and even the spice levels, we keep it at a mid-range, so that if somebody eats a spicier version of it, they can always customize it. They can always add a couple of chilies to it and customize it. So yeah, I mean, so far it's been 3 years, and currently we are considering starting exporting our products to North America, where we see people are showing interest, and since there were travel restrictions and stuff, so people are looking forward for these kind of products there. Other than that, we're also planning to enter the retail market. Now, as a preparation, the something that I started from home couldn't be continued, in the same premises, because there is more demand, and then you just can't keep using the same kitchen to do stuff. And so we have a facility. We have a small micro unit, what I call it. So we have machinery, some basic machinery that we need to dry roast it or grind it, or basically clean it. Cleaning is mostly done I mean, using hand, but basic machinery that are used to process these products, then packaging it, and then finally we process the orders as and when we get orders from Amazon. And we are on I think 5 or 6 other e-commerce portals, and we consolidate all the orders and then process on a day in day out basis. So for which we have hired helpers, and so right from receiving the raw materials until processing, until the order is processed, that is sent out to the customer, everything is done in house. We have not outsourced any part of it. And yeah, I mean, we're looking forward to bringing in more business through exports. And also I think the growth the growth of iPACA will be exponential once we get into the retail market. Yeah, so that's about my journey.
Thank you for that share of thoughts. One quick question before I hand it over to the co-host asking for more questions.
Sure.
Why the name iPACA? I mean, that's number one. Number two, why should one go for iPACA when I have so many other alternatives? Now, for a customer, it's like an agony of choice. Too many things are there in the market. Why should one go and buy iPACA?
Okay. So the name iPACA came from, so basically wanted to keep the name trendy to start with. And Paka basically in Kannada means cook, cooking. It kind of is synonymous with cooking. And then we just wanted to keep it trendy. To begin with, it started with Swayam Paka. Swayam Paka is that you're cooking, or you're cooking for yourself, kind of a thing. So Swayam was like pretty old fashioned. So we wanted to kind of make it trendy, and then we removed Swayam and made it I. So it's kind of a traditional brand, but still kind of catering to the new kitchen needs. So we it loosely translates to I can cook, or I will cook, or I can cook for myself, around that. So yeah, so that's how the name came into being. And why iPACA is basically, like I said, this is something that I've been like surprised about whenever I talk to people, is that not many people notice the ingredient that goes into the food. Like when you pick up a food package, or some masala or something that from a shelf of a supermarket or buy online, you don't really turn the package back to see what ingredients are there, what is really going into my food. Is this like preservative free? What are the chemicals that are going into it? What impact will it have if I have it on a regular basis? Very rarely that I've heard that people say that, oh yeah, I know, I realize I saw this on a label. No. So, I mean, we are also struggling hard to bring in that awareness that please read what's on the food label. It's very important. But one thing I can say that IPACA products do not have any preservative. Absolutely not. I think because of that reason, when somebody prepares food with IPACA, you will not experience any bad smell or aftertaste. That's a general concern with food products which are ready to cook, ready to eat, where they bring it home and then they cook it. There's something that I'm not liking about it. There's some weird taste, there's some weird smell, so people relate to that. But with IPACA, I'll assure you that you'll not have that experience. So it'll be just like how you cook at home. It'll be fresh, it'll be um, just like home food. And we make in small batches. It's not a commercial scale brand, so we make in small batches. So whatever, when you order IPACA on Amazon, what you receive would be within the last 3 days, manufactured within the last 3 to 4 days. It'll be as fresh as what you make at home from scratch. So as soon as you open the pack, you will be able to actually experience the freshness of our products. That's the other thing. And yeah, I mean, in fact, after I've started IPACA, I've realized that even the basic masalas that I've been using, like masalas like, in fact, garam masala, pav bhaji, these are not some things that we used to make at home. We always buy from outside, because being a South Indian, you're always, you don't have that kind of confidence that, okay, I can make a garam masala at home, because that's not your forte. You always are good at you either rasam or vangibaat powder, the normal things that you use. But I used to always go by these North Indian masalas. But since I started IPACA, I always, there was this inquisitiveness in me that okay, I think I should try these also sometime at home. And now I realize the freshness of the masalas that we make at home, of these specific masalas that we make at home, compared to what I used to buy, that makes a lot of a difference in your food when you cook it. So I would say the IPACA being a clean food, and as in no preservatives and chemical used, it being made in small batches, which will give you that freshness. And you can eat IPACA on a regular basis, on a daily basis, carefree, because that is something that I use at my home also. That is something that I use at home till date. That is what I feed my kids. So it's completely safe and healthy. So, I mean, these are the reasons that I can think of why IPACA.
Okay, I mean, is this also certified by any agencies, or is this just a verbal assurance that you give to your clients or your customers?
Regarding
how does this quality assurance gets communicated to your clients? Is it just your assurance and the feedback from your clients, or do you also go by any government certifications or any other recognitions? You said,
so FSSAI certificate is anyways there. That has to be there. Other than that, there is no government certification to certify the freshness or the quality of the ingredient or the quality of the mixes. There's nothing that I've come across so far. And the proof of that is only when you experience it for yourselves, and also the reviews that customers gives us, or they leave it on the online marketplace. But the basic certification for food, for its hygiene, the production unit, and the hygienic condition with which we manufacture it, that is there basically.
All right. Co-host, over to you. You can continue the questions. I have more questions, but I'll come later.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Now we'll be taking up questions from our audience, since our guest is a bit late. Anyone has any questions can ask now.
Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. First thing, very good evening to all present here. Ma'am, your journey was like a motivation for all women entrepreneurs, is what I believe, because I mean, the way people cook and things like that are more observed by women. It's not that men doesn't like didn't start cooking or something, but still, it would be easier for men as well to like imbibe. I mean, at least buy those products and try for it themselves when they're staying alone or something like that. I just wanted to ask this question, like, how was it like very easy for you as a woman to start a business on your own, like from the ideation and then running it till now, managing all this maybe on your own or with your team? How did you like manage all of that?
I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
My name is Aaron.
Adam?
Aaron, Aaron, Aaron.
Aaron. Okay. Hi, Aaron. Thank you for acknowledging it. That is one thing that I'm proud of, is that um, basically IPACA enables everyone to cook, right from a child who can, use stove, light the gas stove, to, old age people. Anybody can cook with it with minimum cooking skill. That's something that I'm very proud of. And that's how we are creating a sustainable lifestyle. Your dependency on food that is available in the market, or eat out or order in, things will reduce, because you can cook for yourself, and you'll hardly take about 15 minutes. And about being able to handle on my own, I think one thing that made it easier for me is that I come with a good amount of experience working with corporates, working with government organizations, because I've also worked with multiple startups. So I had a basic idea of how to run it, just that it was not my own thing. I was working for someone at that point in time. And basically, the inherent quality in me, where I'm very organized and I'm very process oriented, helped me a lot, because even before starting, I had I did research and gathered what are the things that I need to have in place in terms of compliance. What are the things that I need to do, so that I am abiding by all the laws that are laid out in this space? Because I was new to the food and beverage industry. I had no idea, because I was working with a water related industry, and corporate in the IT industry. So that basically helped me lay out these things and then make a plan. That is very important. Like, for example, if we have to launch a product 3 months from now, I need to start the planning now. I need to have a proper research done. I need to circulate it and do a small feedback session. I need to, adjust the recipes based on the feedback. I need to have the labeling done, content written, and then it goes for printing. And then finally create that anticipation and then launch it. So it's a 3-month lead time. So I would say that methodical planning has helped me a lot. And also I am basically, I do my research. I do my homework in terms of, I talk to people. I find out if I have, let's say, one problem to solve. I talk to at least 5 people to understand what are the different aspects of it, or how could I solve it better. Try and find out a efficient way of solving it. And then I take a call on, okay, I think what person B said sounds better and more reliable, and easier to do compared to A and C. So that way, I think decision making, I've been able to manage, because I've handled a lot of things earlier. Plus, proper planning has helped me. Did that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Just adding on to the earlier question, how easy was it to navigate between your personal and professional life? How did you balance that? You said you had kids, and you had your parents at home, a family. How did you balance your personal and professional life?
Now being an entrepreneur, or earlier in being in the corporate life?
Probably the transition phase from a corporate warrior to a self-warrior as an entrepreneur, being your own boss? How easy was
Yeah,
it?
I think being my own boss gives me that flexibility of planning my day the way I like it to be. I take calls only, between a certain time, so that I can, take a break in between or spend some time with my kids, or then I make some time for myself for certain, preparations, or like there's something other thing going on at IPACA every day. So I need to be able to be there for those things. I think it was harder when I was working for someone else, in corporate or elsewhere, because um, I'm always answerable to someone. Not that it's harder now because I'm not answerable to anyone, because I am responsible for whatever happens. But however, I can manage my time in a way that I know when it needs to be done, I know how it needs to be done, or if I could delegate it to someone else, and I'll get it done. I don't have to go back and report to somebody why it did not get done today. So while you're working for someone else, there is always this, I don't know, I don't know what it called, a sword on top of your head that, okay, I think I should complete this within this time, otherwise I'll be in trouble. There is always this thing hanging on your head, no matter how good your boss is. But it was quite challenging actually working, because being a woman in now things are better, I would say, but earlier, while I was in the corporate sector, I think things were much more less flexible, I would say. At least now people are open to work from home, or it's not looked at in a way that you're just wasting time, or like not working. But earlier, working from home was seen as, okay, I think you're taking a day off, that's how it was seen. And still coming back home and managing these things, I used to really get frustrated and worked up, because at the end of the day, there are certain responsibilities I still need to manage, yet delivering whatever my boss or the company is asking me to. So it was very stressful. I think that way I'm very relieved now, and I can manage based on my schedule. I work things around. And also I'm happy about the fact that people show flexibility now. When I say I cannot take a call right now, they acknowledge that and say, okay, whenever you're free. But that was not the case earlier, right? I had to take a call when somebody reached out to me, or whenever the other person was needing that call to happen. So that way I think my work life balance is much so much better now. And I agree with the other thing that you said, that we work 24/7. If not physically working, it is always going on here. Something other plan is forming, and some follow up that you suddenly remember. And since morning today, I've had multiple calls, and it doesn't seem like a Sunday. Even though I'm at home, it doesn't feel like a Sunday. But you always have this content that you're actually contributing and doing something. There is a purpose that you're driving, and then you're happy about it. Had my supervisor or boss asked me to work on a Sunday in a corporate, no way, I would never would have agreed to do that. Because literally the you would be waiting for your Friday to be over to enjoy your weekend. I would never work on a weekend then. And now I don't see that limiting me. Saturday or Sunday, it doesn't matter. You're either ideating on something, you're talking to your customers, or doing something that is contributing to IPACA.
Yeah, my next question is slightly academic, because there's a kind of a continuing debate about entrepreneurs are born or they can be made. I mean, what exactly is your take on it? Because majority of the autobiographies of these established entrepreneurs, right from their childhood, or probably at the phase of their schooling, they were clear about they wanted in life. So is it like entrepreneurs are born entrepreneurs, or probably it's the circumstance? Of course, it's subjective to people, but then what's your take on it?
I would say I don't want to comment on whether they're born or the circumstance. I think they need to have a certain quality, I feel, to become a successful entrepreneur. Like qualities of leadership, quality of, managing your time well, quality of being very organized, quality of thinking out of the box. I think these are all very much needed to become a successful entrepreneur, and these qualities are there in pretty much everyone. It's just about you exploring it. Somebody might be very good at thinking out of the box, but they don't really realize that until they put it into use. And uh, I would say from my experience that I think I would have gotten into being an entrepreneur much earlier in life, had someone kind of counseled me or kind of told me, you know what, this is something you should try. Or the way we were raised, I was born into a family. My parents were both government, they were employed in the government office. So there is always this a very narrow, I don't know, I don't call it a narrow approach, but it is more like, I actually wrote a blog about it, that you raise your kids to become an entrepreneur irrespective of what they end up doing in life, because you give them that exposure. The way we were raised was that, oh, you do the best you can in your academics, and then you come out of your whatever bachelor's, master's, and then you join a job, and then you work there, you climb up the ladder. Nobody told me at that, while I was studying, that you know what, you could actually start a business, this is what you could do, and this is great. Had I attended some workshop or something, a talk like this, maybe I would have been inspired, but we didn't have that opportunity at that point. So I just followed that path, and maybe after I started working 10-15 years down the line, I realized, what the hell, what am I doing? I don't want to get up and go to office today. I don't feel like it. I think I want to do something of my own. I should have started it long back. At least now let me start doing it. And I think, I won't say the last 10-15 years I was in working for someone else has gone waste, because a lot of things that I've learned now helps me not make those mistakes. I probably learned at a cost of someone else. It was like a paid training for me. I'm using all those skills that I picked up, or I learned, or what I got from there now. But I would say that jump into this boat much earlier, be an entrepreneur, take that risk much earlier in life. And you need to give it at least 10 years for to see some result. So start early.
All right. More questions from the audience, otherwise I'll keep on.
Sorry to interrupt. We have some questions in our chat box.
All right.
So we have a question from Shrine. There are many companies coming with toxic-free healthy commodities where production cost is more. How do we decide the price to stay competitive and profitable in the market?
This is from as a manufacturer angle, right? How do you keep it competitive? For a product to come into the market, if you have an idea when you're ideating, I think it is very important to research on what products are already there in the market, and how are they how is your product going to be very different from those, and what is the price range, not just what products but also the price range. Now let's say there is a competitive product to Ipaka, which is there in the market at 50 rupees, a pack of similar product which is at 50 rupees. Now I'm selling at 70 rupees or 100 rupees. Now what differentiates me is that what is the value offering that I have. If it is a very similar product with some minor differences, it's not going to make much of a difference. The customer will opt for something that is priced lesser. But if I'm adding a lot more value to it, if I'm adding a lot more value in terms of, let's say, for example, I say that it's a handmade stuff. It is something that, done in a small, handmade, homemade are some things that are pretty curated. What I mean is that it is not done on a commercial scale. So something where you are sourcing the best quality ingredient, you're sourcing organic ingredients and then manufacturing it, the cost of the product will obviously go up compared to the commercial products that are available in the market. Now, if you the way to price it competitively is that based on your research of the products already available in the market, if your cost is slightly, if the cost that you're incurring manufacturing it is on par with the commercial or slightly higher, it will generally be higher because you're not manufacturing on a larger scale. So it is okay to price it at a higher price, but then it is very important that you communicate the value add that you're giving with your product to your customers. Customers these days, especially the millennials, seek something that has a value add compared to what the product that is very generically or that has been there available in the market. Something that is has a niche in it, something that is tailor-made for you, something that is that. So basically look for that, identify what value add your brand or product is giving, and then make sure that is communicated. And people really don't mind spending 10 extra bucks or 20 extra bucks on a product which gives you that value compared to what is commercially manufactured, and then something that is already there in the market. So don't worry about that.
Has this pandemic been a blessing in disguise? Because going by the rate of growth and the increased number of advertisements of tech companies and a lot of food. In fact, about a month back, we had Fresh to Home, the entrepreneur who owns Fresh to Home, and he was also saying that the food industry and education industry are the two industries which benefited quite a lot, especially those who had their presence. So how has been your experience post-pandemic in terms of its growth and its reach?
So during the pandemic, we grew 2x. We doubled business because people were looking for such products. But unfortunately, for about a month or two, we had to close down business. We closed down production because that was a call that I took so that I don't put my helpers into the risk. They all go back to their kids at home. I didn't want them to venture out every day, come walking and then be exposed to things and then go back home. So I took a call that I want to shut down production for a month to be on the safer side until they're vaccinated. But the market scenario is such that we could actually double the business. And I think a lot of our customers were waiting for us to open business after the close down. And the first couple of months after we opened was also amazing. The business was great, simply because people now are at home, cooking at home. They're relying more on what they cook at home. So they are looking for such options where they can try and cook different stuffs and variety. Yeah.
I guess there are questions from Rekha and Amina.
Hi, ma'am.
Yes, Amina.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to say that your journey has been an inspiration to a lot of us. Then my question is, the main highlight of your products was that they were preservative free, right? So the chances of them getting perished is increasing proportionally, right? So how do you manage that part is what I want.
You mean we'll have shorter shelf life? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we promise a shelf life of 3 to 6 months versus the commercially available products, which are 12 months to 2 years. That's one challenge that I've been trying to address. And that is the sole reason why we are still only on the e-commerce platforms, that we have not ventured into retail stores yet. For any product to be in the retail stores, we need to have at least 6 months of shelf life. Now, the way we are positioned is such that when we get orders on these e-commerce portals, we send out products which were produced, sometimes produced even that morning, the morning the orders are being shipped out, probably a previous day or within like 2 to 3 days of when they were manufactured. Now, given that scenario, even if I give them a shelf life of 3 months, so within a week of manufacturing the product, it will be in the hands of the customer. So they get the complete shelf life of the product. I mean, the time period for them to use it. And we also suggest once you open the pack, you can refrigerate it and you can use it for another 3 months additionally, beyond the shelf life. Because to be on a conservative side, I've given the shelf life to be 3 to 6 months, but it could as well be more than that. The whole reason is that we want to experience our customers to experience the best or the fresh quality of the fragrance and the quality of the products. So we didn't want to extend it to more than that period. Now, I cannot go on like this. I cannot keep going on e-commerce portals. There's only so much we can do, because there's only a very tiny percentage of people who buy on e-commerce portals, especially grocery part of it. So in the last 3 months, me and my team, we were researching on how do we increase the shelf life of our products without actually adding any preservatives. The simpler way is just add some preservatives, antioxidants, and then you're good to go. You can increase it to 12 months, 24 months without any problem. We didn't want to do that. So last 3 months, we've been researching on how do we increase it. Now, there were a couple of options that we got to know that we could potentially do. Is that we could do vacuum packaging, we could do retort packaging. There are different packagings that we could use or introduce to IPACA such that the shelf life will automatically increase to from 6 months to 1 year without adding any preservatives to it. Now, that is a point where now we need to decide whether we want to go for that packaging, and then that becomes our entry into the retail market. Right now, I don't see any other way, simply because the shelf life is so short. And we also don't want, the basic principle is not to add any chemicals or preservatives. But yes, like you said, right now, the shelf life is pretty small because there are no chemicals to increase the sustainability of those mixes. Did I answer your question?
Pretty clear.
Yeah, Rekha, over to you. Rekha Subhash, question from her too.
Yes, thank you. So good evening, ma'am. Thank you for sharing your beautiful journey. So I'm a second year MBA student. So I was going through your website and I saw that you're offering a wide range of products like Pleogram mix and all. So I was just eager to know what are your upcoming products, any products in pipeline, or maybe after a few months.
Yeah, like you said, something that we're going to launch probably next quarter is what we'll be working on now. I don't want to reveal the products because they're always a suspense until the last minute. We try and keep that suspense. But what I would like to say is that from my experience or from what I've learned in the last 2 to 3 years, I've come to know that ready to eat food is what sells the most. People use ready to cook occasionally. Instant mixes also, like they specifically have days when they use it, but ready to is something that has a very good repeat buying cycle. Like, let's say for example, I buy a pack of a snack or something like that. Within a day or two it gets over, so I go buy it again, or the next week I buy it again. So the repeat cycle of ready to eat products are quite high. So that is probably something that we're going to explore or get into in the coming months. Probably the next 2 to 3 products will be focused around ready to eat or something around the snacks.
Okay. So, are you also planning around different cuisines?
Actually, yes, we are planning around different cuisines. Right now, we are very focused on South Indian food, South Indian and specifically cuisines of Karnataka. But we are definitely planning on some sub brands under IPACA, which could where we could explore something beyond, Karnataka, other South Indian states, or even beyond that. Probably North Indian or East West cuisine. So we definitely have that on a long term goal. But yeah, for the time being, we are trying to be a lot more focused on growing the product range in the South Indian market itself.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for answering.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for answering the queries. Anyone else have any queries?
Yes, Anand sir is joining now. He had a busy day. That's the reason he had to delay the entire discussion. So, I mean, this talks a lot about how an entrepreneur navigates through their personal and other professional commitments. So let's wait. Thank you, Bindu Jairam ma'am. And just one last question. Um, right from beginning, you've managed things on your own, right? Collecting customer feedback, understanding or addressing customer grievances, market research, whatever things an entrepreneur has to go through. Is everything now? What is the state now? Like, how many people are employed? How many are involved in research? Could you just elaborate your insight on this?
From IPACA perspective, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, to begin with, I wanted to do everything on my own so that I know what I'm getting into or how it's done, so that when we employ someone, I know what is needed out of them. Right now, we have someone who's taking care of the marketing part in the leadership team. I've hired a senior marketing consultant to do the market research and see how we can position our products when we grow big, when we get into the retail market. How do we position them, or who exactly is our target customer? Even though I say that anybody can cook with it, and from 10-year-old to 70-year-old, anybody can use it, we still have to nail down on who's our target customer, what is the age group who will buy our product the most. So that project is underway. So I have employed someone who's working for us. We have designers who design the social media posts and labels, and basically does the creative job around that. We have on the ground helpers who will do the admin job, who will do manufacturing, help with the manufacturing, packaging, and all that. And so small one-time assignments, I generally outsource it instead of hiring someone full-time. But something that is an ongoing thing, we always hire. We have the in-house team to handle it. The marketing consultant job, the market research thing is a one-time thing for now, at least. So I have outsourced it. But otherwise, the other things where the legal aspect of it, we have someone to talk to, or we have certain a number of hours that we have allocated every month to talk to about potential partnerships and agreements and whatever that is going on at that point in time. So the legal help is there. We have basically these are the people I've hired from an external as consultants. Then we have someone to take care of.
Yeah, we can take a pause here because we have one more speaker. We'll address.
Okay, sure.
If you're available, we could stay for some more time.
Sure.
And take a few questions. So
Okay.
Anand Rajesh sir, good evening and welcome to this platform. Welcome to the Samvad little conversation. So we were listening to Bindu Jairam ma'am about her journey of establishing the venture and also taking us through the entire process of where she had evolved. We would love to listen to your journey. Primarily, what made you switch from being an RJ to an entrepreneur, and then why this sustainable business model, why this unique concept, a few aspects, if you could share with us. Then from there, we'll ask more questions. Sir. Over to you.
Definitely. First of all, I'm very sorry that I joined in late. Actually, we went for a tree festival in the morning, and it's on the outskirts of Bangalore. So once I went there was hardly any range, and then my phone got switched off. By the time we could come back, it was so late. It started raining, so that's why I'm joining in late. I'm really sorry about it, but I'm glad. I think Bindu has been having a great session there. Thank you so much, Bindu, and thank you so much, first of all, Professor, for giving me a chance to be part of this. I was a little late, so I missed out on the major part of everything. When it comes to my cafe, Eat Raja, so it is India's first zero-waste juice bar, so where we serve all of our juices within the fruit shell. I wish I could have reached my shop. I mean, we have 4 outlets right now in Bangalore, and all the 4 outlets actually are going to be very busy on a weekend. But I'm right now, I just reached and I quickly put the phone on charge to turn it on so that I can join you guys on this meeting. So I guess we still have like half an hour for this entire Zoom meet, which is like really great. So I thank everybody from School of Management Studies and NIT Calicut. And this Samvad should definitely be of some use is what I think. I started this cafe not by a plan or anything like that. So this was a cafe which was being run by my father from 1970s. So it was a ordinary juice bar, to say so. So he used to run it like any other normal juice bar where juices are served inside glass jars. So that is what he used to do. But after he passed away in 2017, I was working as a radio jockey at that time, and I had no clue about how to do a juice shop business. So I told my mom that I don't know what to do with the shop. So we shut it actually. We kept it shut for almost about 7 to 8 months. And that's when my mom said, hey, we can't let this happen because your dad ran this for about 47 years. And here we go, we are keeping it shut for no reason. So why don't we restart it? So I told my mom, like, I have no clue, neither did I have the interest to run a juice bar as I did not know anything about it. So I told my mom to run it the way how it was running, just to keep it alive. And my father used to use a lot of paper, plastic, and all of that any typical juice bar would use. My mom started running this juice bar, and I gave her instructions that we will run this juice bar, but without creating any garbage. So we started serving juices inside of a glass jar, like how in any juice center it's done. But when I came back to see, there was hardly any business. So my mom also had no clue how to run a juice bar. So she was finding it really difficult. That's when I quit my radio jockey job. And then I came over to my shop to help my mom. And I figured out that, it is running, but not making any business. So quite naturally, I was the kind of a person who's always interested in doing some kick-ass, doing something out of the box. So what I figured out was there was no additional value for people coming to my shop other than just drinking juice. Whereas I was focused more on giving them an experience which is unparalleled or something that is new. So it was the summertime where we get watermelons. And I saw that, if we cut the watermelon into 2 and scoop the fruit out, it's so easy. Anybody can serve the juice inside of that, and it looks very fancy and very Instagrammable. That's how it all started. April 15th. It was around Vishu time, I think. Immediately after that, so we started serving watermelon juices to start with inside of a fruit shell. 15th of April, 2018. That's when it started. And then on, people were like initially very excited, like somebody is serving juices instead of a fruit shell. And I was not giving them straws also to a lot of people actually had opposition. They said like, what, how do we drink this juice? We've not used, people weren't used to drinking juices like that. But I had put down conditions that you have to drink it only this way and no other way. So it was a kind of a difficult situation for quite a lot of them, because one, they were taken by surprise, because I had substituted the watermelon juice with not with a glass jar, but with a fruit shell. And after I started serving juices, when I started posting it on Instagram, is when it started becoming a little viral. And after a few days, people started coming to my shop asking just for that watermelon so that they can click pictures and put it on Instagram. And that's how we started off serving juices inside of fruit shell. And by August 2019, we had completely stopped serving juices in any glass. All the juices were served inside of a fruit shell. And our innovations, many innovations we have, but the chili guava shots that we created with a little bit of spice and sugar started rocking. And even till date, it is the most sold juice at our juice center. So our idea was to give everybody who comes to a juice bar an experience of how completely zero waste they can be. So we started serving juices instead of a fruit. And then we asked people, after you drink this juice, you eat the fruit. So guavas, cucumber lime, apple, jujube, fig, all of these fruits, you can drink the juice and eat the shell as well, which means that at the end of it, there is no waste generated. And that is how we started telling people, here you go. We have zero waste juices now, where you don't need a cup. Labor time is saved because nobody needs to wash the glasses after every juice. And the best part is you really get to taste the fruit and the juice as well. That's how we started becoming viral. After that, there has been no looking back. Constantly, we have been doing a lot of innovations like the cycle mixing, the cigarette juice, the super 30 juice. And now we have something called as handkerchief juice that we are launching next week. So we are just sitting on top of all innovations, making sure that people who come to our juice center get a totally different experience, and that's what people come for.
Nice, sir. Wonderful to listen. Sir, just one question. Whatever articles I've read about you or your venture, there's a beautiful narrative that is said. So, how important do you think is storytelling in entrepreneurship? Because the way you articulate, the way you present your business ideas, the way it gets reported, is all in the form of a beautiful story. And how important, because I mean, that's how you build your business, the Instagram through which the stories have made what your venture is today. So how important is storytelling?
Extremely important. Like how, if you have listened to any of my talks, or this is obviously one of the talks, I'm extremely creative when it comes to picking So in my case, our shop in itself has a lot of story to tell. One, the shop is located right at a marketplace where a lot of people do come. And our shop is almost half submerged from ground level, which means that it's hardly visible. But still, there are people always coming outside and standing and queuing up and having juices. So I made sure that our board, which it says Eat Raja, is really loud, big, and clear. So that one point of communication helped a lot for people to find where this place is. And then, whenever we made use of social media, in fact, thanks to all the vloggers, the Instagrammers, YouTubers who came to our shop till date, who have been coming. Even today also, we had somebody come over. If they were not there, we wouldn't have reached to whoever we are reaching right now. So the brilliant storytelling, the way how many people made reels, how their content was projected, all of this actually painted a beautiful imagery of what Eat Raja is. Many of them have never even come to Eat Raja, but they still follow us, like us, and they keep commenting, which means that they have set expectations just through beautiful storytelling. It is very important, like how in Hindi they say, "Jo dikta hai, wo dikta hai." In my case, it's exactly true. Every time we make juices, we put out pictures, posts about it, and people have a look at it, and they really feel like coming down and having juices. So it's extremely important.
Rashmi ma'am, a request to mute your microphone.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that was about storytelling. So what are your plans for? One question of which should be common for both. I think Bindu ma'am had already addressed that. How has this pandemic period been for you?
Well, pandemic has been a bit of a problem for all of us, and more so for us because at Eat Raja, we don't parcel juices at all. So although there was some kind of a relaxation given for eateries and food joints where we could have parceled our juices, I clearly stayed away from that. Instead, I got on to Clubhouse, Instagram. We were doing a lot of sessions. Our idea was always to sell the concept and not the product. So our constant effort was always on selling a concept. Throughout the lockdown, all that I did was got onto all kind of forums. I was going on talking about the kind of work that we were doing. How are we doing waste engineering? What is it that we do with waste? A whole lot of things about it. So there was a lot of talk about how we do what we are doing. So we never really had business, but we were still growing. A lot of people were getting to know us. Even during the second lockdown, the Clubhouse, we were quite a rage because I was there every day, spending a lot of time talking, interacting with a lot of people. So business-wise, it's picked up now. But during the pandemic, we definitely had a slump, but not something that we would shut down shop for. Since we had a great concept, people were just waiting for the lockdown to get over. And once the shops opened, we had a lot of crowd outside. So that's example to, if you have some really good product, there is always a market for it.
Yes, I mean, there's three observations. One, what you've been selling, both Bindu ma'am is also Anand sir has been selling is not a product, but you're selling an experience. So I think the experience is what matters quite a lot. Second is about the importance of storytelling. Bindu ma'am also spoke about how she collects feedback from people, and then Anand sir also spoke about how he's been super active in various platforms, narrating and building a kind of storyline. And the third is about the kind of innovativeness that you've brought in everything that you've done, and which help you stay connected with the people. So is there anything that you're planning ahead, or probably the post-pandemic plans for you? I mean, there is a question for both. Anand sir is also, probably we'll first listen to Anand sir and then over to Bindu ma'am.
Yes, expansion, that's the plan, because we've been waiting, like ever since our juice bar became viral. A lot of them, of course, like I'm sure people are sitting in Calicut, so they might not be able to drink our juices. They would only seen it. There are people who are sitting in Delhi or any part of the world. They might only get to see us through Instagram and YouTube and Facebook, but they can't really physically have our juices. So there you go. Once the second, between the first and the second wave, we had already made, plans of expansion. We started a franchisee in Vijayawada, which is doing really well. And now after the second wave, we've already started 3 more outlets in Bangalore, one in VV Puram, the other one in Decathlon, Mysore Road. We got good support from Decathlon. So we believe, both of us believe in zero waste concepts, and we have started off there. We need to see how far and how good it's going to be, because the first time we are trying it inside of a already existing business. So whereas the other 2 outlets are open for public, it's on the main road, it's directly to your vision. You can see that and get into the shop. Whereas Decathlon, it's on the second floor and it's exclusive for Decathlon walk-ins. So going forward, definitely we have a lot of things to do. We want to clean up beaches, put up beach cafes. put up our cafe in rural places, supporting rural people. We want to see how it works. The whole idea is to sell the concept of how one need not generate waste at all. So that's the way forward. We are looking at some pitches and some investments. If that comes by, then we are going to sporadically explore all over India.
And sir, one thought, I mean, we did a bit of a research among the homestays in Kerala. And
Yeah.
one of the things post-pandemic planning, what they've done is they've set up CC cameras in their premises, and the entire process is being live streamed through YouTube. And does that work? I mean, to bring in more transparency and also trust in the system? I mean, I think this question applies for both. In your case, Bindu ma'am, I think it's all about IFF. I mean, some certification that you have, and also the kind of the commitment that you give to your clients. But then, in addition to that, wouldn't this bring in more transparency in the system? Or what in
Okay,
addition to this? Yes, sir.
I have something to say definitely here. See, having grown in Bangalore with absolute no knowledge about hotel industry, when I was a radio jockey, of course, I've interacted with a lot of people who are from hotel industries. MTR, which is a very famous brand, which is known for a walk-in kitchen. So you actually walk through the kitchen to see what all is happening so that you get the complete confidence. And that's probably the reason why MTR, it's world famous. However, in our process, what happens is what we have done is innovation in terms of how we make our juices and we present our juices. Of course, the rest of it is all on CCTV camera, but how we prepare our juices, how do we make a banana into a cup? So these are all our technical innovations, which we don't share. Of course, some part of videos have already been shared when we were not viral. So at that point of time, we did not know how to guard our secrets. Once we became a company, of course, we have a consultant, we have a lawyer, we have a patents lawyer, a lot of other things. So we have been guided by a lot of people not to disclose our formula of how we make our fruit cups, and how our serving part is very visible. It's all there in all the videos. However, the making part of it is the process that we have patented. So it is, of course, subject to citation. So all these things, not everything can be showed. And for us, there is no need for us to show in a live format like how it is done for other businesses. So we are in a food business and we are an innovative juice bar. Rest of all, everything is there on Instagram. Every day, whatever we do is there on Instagram. All our customers, the way how we serve the juices and what people have to say, everything is there on Instagram. We are by far a very trusted and a very transparent juice bar. So people keep coming back for.
Yeah. So if there are more questions, request the participant to share it in the chat window. Before that, one last question from my side. Both of you, this is a concept or an idea which is easy to emulate. Somebody else can also do this. And therefore, what are your strategies to stay in this market? You just assume a bigger player comes with their brand name, and then they just copy your business idea. Wouldn't you become kind of irrelevant? But to stay agile and to stay relevant, what are your plans? What are your strategies? That's my last question. And if there are more questions from the audience, I'll invite that. Anyone can answer, either Anand sir or Bindu ma'am.
I think I've been talking for a long time. Bindu ma'am, if you want to, or if you're not, I am ready with my answer.
Okay. So, sir, the thing is, I have this concept where I say that if somebody had to do this, they would have already done it. They didn't have to wait for us to come out with it and then copy it and all that. What the kind of food products that we have are unique. The recipe is unique. Now, if somebody had to do it, they would have already done it, and then nobody to stop them. Having said that, there could be businesses who would want to do something similar on similar lines, or kind of try to duplicate it in their own way. The only way to do it is like Raja said, I think we need to grow exponentially, get some investments, and then grow, become so big to a level where that, other businesses or smaller businesses or somebody who is trying to copy you will not be able to, or how can I say this? That we already have established a brand name, that your products are associated with your brand name only, and you are well known, you already have it in every market possible, and then somebody else entering with a similar product will always be seen as duplicating it. Yeah, so growing exponentially is the answer to it.
Yes. And certainly both have the first mover advantage, and let that turn in your favor and remain sustainable and ever growing. That's my wish, or wish on behalf of both the team Let's Chat and the Samvad and the National Institute of Technology, Calicut. Over to the co-host, if there is any questions to be raised or any other additions or any other formalities. Over to you, Bhagya.
Thank you, sir.
Bhagya takes over, maybe I can quickly add on to this. So
Yes, sir.
definitely, like IPACA, Eat Raja. See, I think both Bindu and I, we're passionate people who have put in a lot of hard work, and we do our things very passionately. So even if somebody copies, they can only copy the look of it or maybe what we are doing. But the passion can't be copied. It comes very, it comes from within. So to get that passion is something that is not possible. They might do a copy of whatever the product is, but they can't replicate exactly what the brand is going to be. So to give you an example, the guy who worked in my own cafe in Bangalore, in fact, after he quit, he went over to Kochi and he started exactly the same concept of Eat Raja. And also, what, Dale had come down to Kerala and he made a video and he even became viral too. But I am running a zero-waste juice bar. I don't know what he's doing. So I last heard that I think he started selling even chai and maybe mutton samosa and all of that. So I have a cafe which runs with a concept, whereas somebody else, they copy, they can't sustain it for a long time. And they'll start adding something else because they have to, end of the day, make business also. So end of it, I think it might wither down, and I think now he's shut down or something like that. So it's not very easy to copy passion unless you're really driven by it. So people will come and people will go, but good brands with a lot of passion will stay for a long time, is what I can say.
Great point, sir. Thank you. Thank you on my behalf to both of you, both Anand sir and also to ma'am, Bindu ma'am, for joining us this evening, spending so much time with us. Bindu ma'am has been with us for almost 1 hour, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Bindu for chipping in for me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I was covering for you, Raja. You were not around, so I was like talking on and on.
No. It makes sense. It was not that we just spoke for long, but we had a lot of good takeaways and wonderful points, wonderful source of inspiration. So let's stay connected and do it on a bigger and a larger platform. Thank you both for joining.
Thank you so much for inviting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Over to you, Bhagya.
Thank you, sir. Do we have Shafi sir here to address the gathering?
Yes. I would like to thank both the guests for joining us in this evening and made our day wonderful. Okay, and I don't want to say much more because Dr. Rishikesh and the moderators have made it very clear. And also we have to appreciate our students who have asked genuine questions and made it clear from you. Thank you once again. And I have no other words other than thanking both of you once again, including Dr. Rishikesh. Over to you, Bhagya. Thank you.
Thank you, Shafi sir. I would like to take this opportunity to thank both our guests, Bindu ma'am and Anand sir, for taking time from their schedule to address our gathering. It has really been an inspirational session for all of us. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining this session. So,